Is Karl Jobst 100% wrong about the graded video game market? Let's talk about it. Stick around. What's going on, my Collectibles friends? We are back again. It is another day. It is another Collectibles video. I'm excited to be here with you all. I wish I could put these videos out more often. My other channel, The Sports Card Dad, takes up most of my time here on the YouTube machine, but I did want to talk about something that I thought was really interesting here recently, where Get the Greg Games put out a video. I'm a big fan of Greg. Put out a video talking about, hey, kind of more of a positive spin on pricing for graded video games, whereas Karl Jobst put on kind of a follow-up video to some of his earlier videos about the graded video game market. So I thought it was interesting because they were kind of combating each other in a way. But we'll dive in here in more detail. So a lot of people blame Karl Jobst for sealed games or CIB game market just kind of going down, way down. So as we know, going back, 18 months, 2 years ago, we saw all-time highs in sealed video games as well as CIB games. Now, I will say there are still games now that are either CIB or sealed that are setting records or still keeping pace to where they were 18 months ago to 2 years ago. So I want to make that clear. However, there are a lot of big titles, a lot of well-known titles that have completely dropped off. 70%, 80%, 90% drops from their all-time highs. But I think that is the key right there, is when Karl first made his first video, the big focus was around price manipulation. And I think that one thing that we need to state right up front is whether you're talking about graded video games, graded comic books, sports cards, non-sports cards, cryptocurrency, whatever we're talking about here, there was price manipulation in different areas for all of these spaces. It's pretty clear to us now when you look at the data. What's great now is we've got data tools, especially on the sports card side, where we can see this, and we're starting to see more of this stuff come out for comic books and games. So you can kind of see these Mount Everest highs, these all-time highs that look a little bit weird. And so part of what Karl was calling out was happening really all over the place. So this is not anything that is some sort of, magical thing that's only related to graded video games. It's just not. It's something that's been going on in the collectible space. And you could even argue in the traditional markets, in some of the traditional finance markets, we've seen some pretty weird things over the last few years. So there's been a lot of anomalies, let's just say that. Well, the good news, if you are a collector or a speculator or an investor of these items, and we'll talk about graded video games specifically, is prices have dropped down a lot. Me specifically, I own about 15 CIB games, and I've got 4 sealed games. And when I first started looking at this, going back 2 years, 2.5 years ago, I only was looking at CIB because sealed was just way out of my price range for the stuff that I was looking for. Now I'm only focused on sealed because I'm looking at the price drops. I'm thinking like, well, I may as well buy the sealed copies, just pay up a little bit more and get sealed, as opposed to CIB for my favorite games. And I'm 42, so I'm focused around Atari and NES, and that's it. That's all I'm focused on. Super Nintendo and forward, even though I love those games and Sega Genesis stuff, I'm really zeroed in on kind of that rare NES, Atari, the vintage games, if you will. That's the deep nostalgia for me, and I really like the fact that those are those first games, those first console games that really got the gaming world going, and of course it's ballooned into what it is today. So did Karl Jobst crash the market? No. However, I don't think he necessarily helped it, obviously. He's shown a light on something that he thought looked strange, but really what we saw was stuff that was going on all over the place, like I said, that just wasn't looking right. And we've now seen huge corrections across the board for a lot of titles. The one thing, though, that I didn't like about his first video is I felt like it cast too wide of a net, to where I got more of a feel like he didn't think that the graded game collector / speculator / investor group as a whole was organic at all. Like the whole thing was inorganic, is the feeling I got. There was a lot of questions, a lot of kind of newbie type comments around grading. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you're somebody coming in and you're a game player, you haven't necessarily collected them before, you're new back into the space, the idea of third-party grading is foreign to you. I got back into collectibles in 2018, and that was the first thing I noticed. What are these graded cards? What are these graded comics, these graded collectibles? What's the story here? Because this is a lot different than 1990 when I was collecting cards as a kid. And so that's kind of what I got for a guy that's got such a huge platform. He called out, discrepancies in grading where WADA had missed this or missed that. But in third-party grading, that happens every single day across all spaces. So that's not anything new. It just made me think like, okay, he doesn't really have a belief in third-party grading at all. And maybe he still doesn't. I don't really know. The third-party grading element that makes sense to me is authenticity. It's not necessarily the number grade. That's part of it, of course, the quality of the item. But it's more about the authenticity. When you go back to 1990, when I was collecting cards, it was you against the dealer, and he was saying it's near mint, it's $8. And you're like, it looks more fair to me. And he would say, no, it's near mint, that's my price. The idea of third-party grading, to give you that number, whether you agree with that grading company or not, is to cut all that out and to say, okay, look, here's a third-party grader that we trust. And in sports cards, it's PSA and it's Beckett, it's SGC, it's CGC. These are the companies that we trust to give us a grade that we're going to be able to transact off of, so that we're not just taking each other's words for it, that it's a near mint card or that it's a real card that's not fake. And the whole idea of third-party grading for video games, and granted, there will be mistakes made, is that we need to know, hey, is that really sealed? Is that the original seal? Was it resealed? Is it fake? Is the cartridge fake? Has the manual been doctored? Has it been restored? What's the story here? That's the whole idea of third-party grading, is more so that you have a little bit more confidence. It's not a 100,000% guarantee that it's all correct, but it's just the idea that, hey, we've had somebody else look at it. It's a company that has some expertise that does this every day, and it's better than nothing, frankly. But now when I watch Karl's recent video, he kind of pulls back off of that. I feel like he's been kind of pulling off. I saw him do interviews kind of after that first video, and not necessarily coming off of the inorganic kind of rise in prices stuff, which I don't think there's a problem calling out things that just don't look right, that look strange. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But he states in his most recent video, I want these games to be worth money, but basically in an organic way. He always had a problem with it being inorganic, which I think in that first video he could have mapped out a little bit better. It was kind of more focused around it being an inorganic market, without kind of covering the other side of it, where, hey, we also do have a lot of collectors / speculators, investors that are legit, that are paying real money, that are actually interested in these things because they're awesome. That's where I've seen a shift. And I do watch Get the Greg Games does these auctions where he's going through, I think it's Heritage Auctions that he runs down, and he's doing watch parties. And Karl's in there watching the watch party. He's actually in the chat. And I think he's a collector. I think he buys games. So, he's in it. He's in the game now, so to speak. And so the whole thing has come full circle. For me, this is a great time because I didn't get in. I wasn't buying games 5 years ago. I wasn't buying sealed games 5 years ago. And so when the prices shoot up like that, it's kind of like, okay, I missed the boat. I'm not going to be buying at those price points. But now we are seeing pretty big corrections where I bought a game, an old NES game, if you know NES, Faxanadu, sealed 9.4 A seal. And again, it's not Zelda, it's not Mario Brothers and some of the the really cool IP, the IP that everybody knows. I love the fact that you can get original Mario Brothers. And again, it's on the back. First game starring Mario, first appearance of Luigi. If you're a comic book collector, first appearance of the character is important. So this is fun. It is fun stuff. And there is most certainly organic collectors, organic collectability among people like me that just have that nostalgia. We were born and raised up in this time period where games were getting going, and it was a thing that you had kind of the Atari crash, in 1983, I believe it was, and then Nintendo kind of saved the day in 85, 86. They came back with the original NES that I grew up on, that moved into the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo. The rest is history. And we have two major grading companies, authenticating companies. In WADA was owned by Collectors. It also owns the largest sports card grading company, PSA, and as well as TCG grading company, PSA. And then we also have CGC that is grading video games as well. And they're big in cards as well as comic books. It's the largest comic book grader. This gives me confidence when I think about, okay, are graded games going to be a thing in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Yes, because you don't have tiny little grading companies that are doing it. You have large companies that are in the space operating. They've got population reports. You're starting to see things that are happening to give this more viability. So it's the cool stuff that we collect. It does have the ability to have an actual market, a secondary market for it, so that we know what stuff is worth when buying, selling, trading, and so forth. I think the thing that people are really missing too here with games, because it's like games, okay, why video games? A lot of it has to do for me, and I know a lot of collectors when I brought this up, is box art. Okay, box art is incredibly important, especially today when, when I buy a Nintendo Switch game for my son, we download it. Occasionally we go to GameStop and buy the game or something, but, you download it right onto the Switch. They're not doing stuff like this anymore. When you look back at the original NES games, it's a giant cardboard box. Atari is the same thing. I've got, Yari's Revenge. It's a giant orange, case. It's just a cool looking box. And I think people don't realize, and I know some people either like or don't like, but you can see the price tag is right there on the front. I prefer the price tag there, especially if it's like a Toys R Us price tag, because of course, rest in peace, Toys R Us. Toys R Us closed down. I've heard they're coming back. Please come back. There's something about Toys R Us as a kid that was just magic. It's hard to explain.
Dad.
Come on. You can end up looking in all the wrong places.
Oh, no.
Stand back, son. Or you can go to Toys R Us. Toys R Us has the world's biggest selection of Nintendo games and accessories.
I like seeing the Kmart sticker or something, a company that's got a KB Toys, because it takes you back. It takes you back to that time. And those retailers were a part of the story. They're a part of the nostalgia, because it's not just the hours of playing the game. It was also walking in with your parents. Maybe it was Christmas time. You're looking at the shelves, the hang tabs, and you see, you have to pick. You can only pick one game, and so you pick it. It takes you back to that, that childhood time where maybe you didn't have. For me, I've got 4 kids. So now I've got all the responsibility. It takes you back to a time where you don't have any responsibility. And so for graded games, when you see this correction, and now you're seeing, okay, sealed games, which is kind of if you can afford sealed games, like fantastic. CIBs for me have been great. I love, trying to get kind of the highest grade, earliest print CIB I can get for certain games is fun. But man, if I can get into some sealed stuff as well, which is starting to happen for some key titles, that's a lot of fun. So I think when we look at kind of the crash of games, a lot of people take crash as, oh man, I need to get out. This is the time to move out. But for people like me that got in kind of as things were high for graded games, this is an opportunity. To me, I look at this as like, oh man, this is the start of maybe a little bit of a buying season to be able to get into some stuff, because I do believe long term that these things will go up. I don't think it's going to be 10x, 100x crypto type deals, but if it just kind of holds value, maybe gains a little bit of ground over time, fantastic. You get the pride of ownership, and then of course when you go to resell in 20 years or something, you have something to show for it. So it's a great time, I think, if you're collecting sealed games, graded games, and also CIB stuff. It's an awesome time. So guys, thanks very much for joining me here today. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We're almost to 500 subscribers on the channel. I appreciate you stopping by. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.